Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. This is going to be a quick video on car insurance advice. Seems to be a hot topic at the minute for a lot of people. Extortionate policies. I've had a look at mine already. It's June, July, and I've managed to keep my 3 policies roughly the same price. One of them's come down a little bit on one of the cars. My partner's, though, hers went up. She only passed her test. She's been driving a full year now, and hers went up a little bit. I think it went up £30 for the year. Not a huge amount, around 10%. Some people are seeing 30-40%. So this is my advice. I've got it written down on a napkin, you know, top professional. These videos are always just done in one go. Tiny amount of prep, no editing. You know, it's short and simple. So this is particularly for young drivers, but any driver really. And I'm just going to give the most logical advice. I've been driving 15 years for what I've learned over the years, how to save money on car insurance. Once you've got your price that's fixed for 1 year, you don't know what it's going to be the next year, as a lot of us have found out recently. So tip number 1, and you're probably not going to like this, is don't drive. So if you're 18, 19, especially if you're in Scotland and you've just passed your test, the best thing you could do is not drive for a year. You know, give it a year. You have a free bus pass in Scotland until you're 22, I think. So whatever you think you need that car for, is it for going to college or going to work or whatever, you're already using a bus or public transport or walking or whatever. If you could do that for 1 year, it will make a huge difference to your driving. My niece, she's young, she's 19, she's already crashed 3 times in her first year. Maybe you're not as stupid as she is. I don't know, right? But if you could take a year where you don't drive, and instead of paying 3 grand for insurance, you stack that cash, put it in the bank, it's going to set you up way better for the following years. It's going to give you more time to pick the right car, which is another one of my tips. Pick the right car, have the money sitting there ready to go. Ideally, I would say in today's market, if you're a young driver, you want to probably stack 5 grand for buying a car, getting your insurance, tax, the whole lot. You're good to go for a year. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2 is when you get your policy, pay for the whole year in one. That's why tip 1 would come in handy. If you've got cash saved up, you could. Now the higher the policy, the bigger the policy, more expensive the policy, the more you pay in interest, paying monthly. If it's a low policy of 300 quid, you probably pay £30 in interest, because you pay interest. It's a loan effectively. So if it's going to be 3 grand, a big chunk of that is going to be interest on what is effectively a loan. So you might get a 3 grand policy, but if you pay in one, it might only be 2.5 grand. So there's a good 500 quid saving. So that's tip number 2. Tip number 3, I see this a lot from people, is to over insure, where you insure yourself for 20,000 miles and you only drive 6. So what to do is calculate how many miles a week you're going to do and multiply it by how many weeks in a year, and that'll give you an idea. So if you get 5 weeks off from work a year, I would just go with exactly how many you drive per day for work, add a little bit more on for social driving, and multiply by 52. That gives you your mileage. Now, if most people are 7,000 miles, 8,000 miles, that sort of range, if you're insuring for 20,000 miles, logically speaking, the more time you spend on the road, the more likely you are to be involved in an accident, whether it's your fault or not. So that's just from pure numbers. So that's tip number 3. Tip number 4, and I'm not going to tell you to do this, this is more of a story, is take a named driver policy. So this happened to me when I first passed my test. I was 1,200 quid for the year when I was 18. My mate passed his test. I got my own policy, my own name, started to build up that no claims discount. He was just put on his dad's policy for the first 2 years, and he saved, I think, over £1 grand in that time. This was 15 years ago. My first policy year was 1,200, then it went down to 1,100, then it jumped down quite a bit. He paid half that the first year, and then even less again the second year, as a named driver on his dad's policy. And in year 3, I think he got his own policy, and we paid pretty much the same. It's all to do with age. And to go on to that, my partner, she was 29 when she was learning to drive, 30 when she passed her test. Her first year's driving for her insurance was the same as me, and I've been driving 15 years. A lot of it is to do with age, and that's why if we go back to tip 1, where if you hold off a year, you wait a year, it's going to make a big difference. That's the best advice I could give, really, is just not to drive. Hold off a year, it'll set you up big time. I think also it'll set you up in a way because you can make that sacrifice. It'll set you up in other financial decisions you make in life. If you can hold off and save that money and work and grind and get that cash built up in your account, you can see those numbers in your account. It changes your mindset for spending. It's the best thing I think a young person could do is just try and stack cash. So that was tip number 4. Tip number 5 is timing for your policy. You've bought your car, you're going to be using mum or dad's car, right? Or you've been driving 5 years, you're looking for another policy. Do it 21 days, 22 days, 3 weeks before it's due for renewal, or due before you want to insure. If you're looking to insure tomorrow, it's going to cost you quite a bit more than if you insure for 3 weeks' time. I don't know why, that's just how they do it in the UK. So give yourself 3 weeks, 21 days. Don't do what my mum and dad do and leave it to 2 days before, and then they find that their cheapest policy is the same as what they paid last year. Oh, that wouldn't be a bad deal in the current market. Okay, so number 6 is to shop around. It's quite obvious one, a lot of people say this. Shop around for your policy. I personally prefer compare the market over go compare. I always find compare the market to be cheaper. I just use that every year. And I play around with the policy. So I'll go in there, put my details in. Don't lie, that's the best thing to do, because insurance companies will do whatever they can to not pay out if you are in an accident, whether it's your fault or not. So this is tip number 7. So shop around, tip number 6, shop around, tip number 7. As part of that, do it online well in advance, 3 weeks in advance. Add drivers, add mum, add dad, add your brother. My dad got points, so I took him off. I asked them what would happen if I took my mother off, who reduced the price last year. Well, it wouldn't be last year, but the year before. But then this year's policy to take my mother off the car, she never drove it, the Rover that I'm in just now, it reduced it again. It only saved me £30, but she literally never drove it. I only added her to save money. It's to do with, I can explain it, apparently it's to do with if you're on a longer journey, you could share the drive with more people, so you're less likely to fall asleep and be tired whilst driving. So that's part of the reason that that apparently makes it cheaper. So that's tip number 7. Tip number 8, I've already mentioned it, is don't lie when you're getting your car insurance policy. Don't put in there that you're only going to do 4,000 miles a year and you know you're going to do 8. Just insure yourself for 8. What happens if you go over you're in month 9 of your policy and you get to 7,500? You're going to break those 8,000. Just get in touch with your insurance and just say you've driven more. You want to increase your mileage. You'll have to pay a wee chunk more to add those extra miles. Say you want to put it up to 10,000 miles, you're just paying an extra bit. Usually it's cheaper to do that online rather than over the phone for a lot of companies. So you can tweak your policy mid-policy term. You just need to pay an additional cost because they're insuring you for miles per year, basically. And so tip number 9, I don't know if I've got 10 tips, but I've got 9, so there we go, is to pick the right car. And I think a lot of people get caught out by this. I saw a friend on Facebook who just got rid of their Ford Focus and bought a Volvo, and her insurance policy was doubling, and it blew my mind that she didn't check first to see what the insurance policy would be. I'm assuming anyway, because she was on Facebook asking for advice on how to get the policy down. And I think what she'd done is she'd just bought a car that was more expensive to insure. Now, if you're a young driver, young drivers buy 1 litre engine cars because they're cheaper to insure. My niece has a Hyundai i10, which is a little 1 litre eco car. A lot of young drivers buy 1 litre Corsas or 1.2 litre Corsas, 1 litre Fiestas, 1.2 litre Fiestas, and young people crash 1 litre Fiestas and 1 litre Corsas. So think outside the box. I wouldn't be surprised if the 1.6 Focus was cheaper to insure for a 19-year-old than the 1 litre Fiesta, for example, because families drive, people with children buy and drive Focuses, and they tend not to crash because they've been driving for a few years and they've got kids in the car and they don't want to kill anyone. So think outside the box with the car. Older cars can be quite a bit cheaper. They can also be quite a bit more expensive. So if you're shopping for a car, it might be worth having 3 or 4 in the peripheral that you want to, that you think that's what I want to get. Run insurance quotes. You could tick that you don't own the car yet. You put in the registration number, find the registration number on Auto Trader or whatever, and get some policies. And I've done the same thing for motorbikes because I recently passed my motorcycle test, and I have 3 cars, and I'm doing tip number 1, I'm actually doing that myself. I'm not going to drive a motorbike or ride a motorbike for a while because I have 3 cars on the road. I'm going to pay everything with cash, with money I have sitting. I'm not borrowing any money with that sort of thing. None of my cars are on finance. None of my insurance is financed. I pay it all off in a oneer in July. I do pay my road tax monthly, so that's on finance, but you pay like an extra £1 a month to pay monthly, so it's nothing. What I found with the motorbikes was actually the cheapest bike for me to insure is more powerful than 2 of the bikes I checked, much quicker than 2 of them. So don't always think that the 2 litre diesel is going to be too expensive for you to insure. quite often people will make these assumptions. So that's the last tip. I think I'm going to have a quick scratch of the old noggin. I can't think of anything else. They're the main ones. Shop around, buy the right car, give yourself plenty of days. If you're young, just hold off for a year, especially if you're in Scotland. You've got that free bus pass. Listen, an incredible thing to have. I wish I had a free bus pass. I've got 3 cars and I use public transport to get to work. I use a bus to get to the next bus I get that takes me to the airport, which then I fly to another country. Then I get off that plane and then I get another bus and then I get the train. And so I've got 3 cars and I commute by public transport most weeks. I sometimes drive to the airport. So that's my tips, my advice for car insurance. 15 years of experience. Don't take it as legal advice, especially being a named driver policy on mum and dad's policy. That's just experience. You know, I had a friend on the age thing. Age is probably the most important thing. I had a friend who rear-ended somebody in his Honda Civic Type R and he turned 25 during his next renewal and his policy still went down even though he caused an accident. Another one with insurance, just quickly before I go. My car was parked outside the house. I wasn't at home. Somebody flew past and smashed the wing mirror off. I got home. I was raging, really, really angry. I called my insurance company to ask for some advice, what my excess was. I should have checked online in hindsight. I'll get to that. And it was £250. I found a replacement wing mirror on eBay for 50 and I changed it over. The following year when I went to renew, I got a phone call for fraud, basically, when I was trying to renew. And they didn't accuse me of fraud, but they told me I'd been involved in an accident. And you know where this is going. I completely forgot about the wing mirror because I didn't claim. And so they basically said, but I didn't claim, you know, I've still got my no claims discount. I didn't claim. Why? What's the issue? Well, we now know, this is what they said, we now know that your car was involved in an accident. So that's going to push your premiums up. So I paid an extra £50 that year for car insurance on that car, and I was absolutely livid with just the situation. Not with them. I understood my car was involved in an accident. I repaired it myself because it was just a wing mirror, and it forced my premiums up, my car insurance premiums. So don't call your insurance company unless you absolutely have to for silly things like that. That's my last piece of advice. Good luck. I know it's not easy out there. Get on those websites and find yourself a policy. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.